G'day everybody, Nick Dingle here again with another WPF tutorial. This time we are having a look at XAML. Now specifically we're having a look at what it is, how you use it, how you add things to it, and then finally a quick example to wrap it all up at the very end. In the previous two videos, I really think that I just gave you a very broad stroke of WPF and GUI programs in general. For this video, this is the first skill video that I want to focus on a concept and give you a fair bit of detail out of it, while still trying to stick to the 10 minutes, of course. But that's just what I'm going for in this particular one. Now, having a look around this interface, you probably, or Visual Studio interface, not just my little blank program, you may have noticed that XAML is plastered everywhere. And if you don't read the name of my videos, XAML is spelled XAML, and it stands for Extensible Application Markup Language. They didn't take the E from the word extensible, they took the X because the X is just cooler and it sounds like XML. If you've never heard of it, don't worry about it. If you have, I'm sure that hit a little bit of a bone for you. So Extensible Application Markup Language is a fancy way of saying a language you can use to write your interface as opposed to drag and drop and coloring it in. Okay, so I personally prefer to design all my interfaces just purely in XAML these days because I'm so used to using things like HTML that it's just become second nature to me. All right. If you've used HTML or XML in the past, this is going to be an absolute breeze for you. Okay. And some of the basics you won't even have to be told. But in that saying that, I actually don't like my interface for Studio set up this way. I prefer this to be the minority of my interface, this designer section up here. And down here, I prefer the XAML to be the majority. Now, I could easily click and drag right here on my mouse is to make this bigger. But I prefer to click on this button, which swaps the two around. So XAML's at the top in the majority, and then my designer's down the bottom in the minority. Okay, and I'll generally speaking, zoom out a little bit just so I can see the majority of my interface at once. So what I tend to do is I'll write my code up here in XAML, and the effects are pretty much immediate on the interface down here. And I'll just use this as a little bit of a checkup to see if my buttons and all that are looking good. There's enough space and the colors are all good. But in saying all that, let's just get right into XAML finally. XAML is based around what you call tags. And every time you draw a tag, it's looking for a control to draw to the screen. So to be more specific, I've already highlighted one for you, and that's grid. All right. Every window you create comes with all this built in, and that includes a grid. So when you open a bracket like this, put a word inside it, and then close the bracket, you've created a tag. Okay? And I like to call these diamonds. So if you enclose something in a diamond, we call it a tag. You also notice that it's got a little partner down the bottom. Now, if you haven't figured that out already, but this is the opening tag to say this is the beginning of a grid, and this is the closing tag or the end of a grid. And it's the only difference really is that / at the beginning of the tag. And that's the same as HTML. And you see with window, he starts up here. And in fact, that's the end of the opening tag. And then he closes down the bottom here. Now, what are all these red things inside the window tag? Well, these are called properties. Now, I'm not going to talk about any of these. Just know that they are incredibly important to actually create your XAML interface. So don't touch them, okay, unless you really know what you're doing. Down here, you see we've got three properties: title, height, and width. They're only separated by a space, which is really handy. And you see in quotes, we've put values to denote what the properties value are. Now, actually, the properties you see here match the properties on the right. So if I change this to what's doing, you see, first of all, down the bottom, it's updated in the title bar automatically for me. And on the right, it's already updated over there as well. So you are more than welcome to change your properties up here in XAML or over here on the right. Okay, it makes absolutely no difference where you change them. Now, I can even change the height to make it a bit shorter. You see it just shrunk a little bit there, and I can make the width a bit longer if I feel like it. Okay, and it automatically updates down the bottom. If I make a stuff up, like forgetting a quote like that, you'll see we get error messages just like we do in code. Now, it's really important, as always, read the error message and try to figure it out. And always look at the one at the top before you look at the one at the bottom. Okay, just giving you a little heads up there. Now, if you ever see this, let me just click down here for a moment. If you get this error message, Do not freak out, okay? It just means you've got an issue in your XAML that you need to go and fix quickly, all right? And if I put this in, you'll notice straight away it comes back. It's pretty snappy, okay? I have got a powerful computer, but it is fairly snappy, all right? These are the basic tags, and these are the basic objects or controls that are given to you when you're writing it. So to write your own ones, I'm going to leave Grid here. I don't want to get rid of him, and I'll explain why in a moment. But I'm going to make this a little bit taller again and a little bit shorter. Sorry, not shorter, skinnier. And then let's add some buttons to it. So for example, I'm just going to open a bracket for a tag, type in button with a capital B, if I can spell tonight, close that tag, and you see it's created a button, but it's taken up the whole space of the grid. Okay, and we'll get to the issue about that soon. But let's put some words on the button. So that's the content property to put words on buttons. So in here, so just before I close the tag, capital C for content equals, and notice it puts the quotes there automatically. I absolutely love that. And you could just put something like press me. And there's my button, and simple as that. So I actually find it much simpler to write a button than it is to click, drag, select the property over here, type in the content. I find it easier just to open a tag, type button, content equals press me. It makes my life a lot easier, I personally think. Now sometimes you'll see in buttons, let me just take this, I'm going to cut that and get rid of content. You'll see people make objects like this, and you'll see it made absolutely no difference to how the button looks. And that's because what I had before is essentially the exact same thing as what I got now. When I've got a tag opening, and in between the opening and closing tag, I've got something, I'm setting the content of that control, okay? So theoretically, this button is actually setting the content of this grid, okay? And this grid is setting the content for this window, okay? So that's just really important to look at in that sense. Now what I'm going to quickly do, I'm going to change this grid. I'm going to get rid of him. So I'm going to backspace him and watch the closing tag because he dissipates as I get rid of the opening one as well. I'm going to put in a stack panel. I like stack panels. Okay, and what they do is they stack vertically or horizontally. By default, it's vertically. So the more controls I add, if I can spell at all, they get stacked vertically on top of each other in the exact order in which you write them. Okay, so I can do that for any object. I can make a text block and just go, welcome to the XAML tutorial. And there it is in the middle there. Let's say I want to get the text in the middle. I can change the text alignment property, set that to center. And you see now the words are smack bang in the center of my screen. And then I can use, let's get a text box in there because why not? This is my text, not test. All right, and so forth and so forth. So that's how a stack panel behaves. And that's why I got rid of the grid, okay? The reason being is if this guy was a grid, I'd just get the last object I was created that takes up the whole space. So that's just one giant text box at the moment. The grid is designed to split into rows and columns, and we're going to do that at the end. I'm going to go back to stack panel for a moment. Okay, so from this point, it's pretty straightforward. So let's add in just one more. Let's do a list box. Okay, now when we add content to a list box, we're actually adding items. What I personally like to do, I like to put list boxes on multiple lines, like so. And inside, when I set the content, you can go list box item. And just like my last video, I had apple as my first one, list box item, banana. So rather than going through that massive, arduous interface that we went through to add all those list box items that I find actually quite slow, I can quickly add items to a list box just by doing this. All right, it's very, very simple. So when I hit start, just like before, all these objects, get back here, behave as they should. These are buttons, this is a text box, this is a list box. Okay, everything looks really squished and ugly, and that's because stack panels take up as little space as they possibly can. That's their default behavior. Now, let's say, for example, I want to start naming these things, because if I want to add code to a button, then I have to name it first. So that sort of gives away what I'm going to do next. I'm going to add some code to the press me button. So the way to add a name, you could either type it over here if you want, but we're focusing on XAML. So I'm going to put space, we're going to put a little X, put a colon, and there's the name property. So if I put equals, type in button press me, like so. Okay, and then to add code using XAML is really simple. I love this. When you press space, type click. There's the lightning bolt to indicate that it's an event. Put equals, and you get this new event handler, and it already tells you here what's going to happen. It's going to bind an event to a newly created method called button press me underscore click, just like what we did when we went to the lightning bolt over here and we double clicked in the click box. Okay, so XAML's doing all of that hard work for us. So I'm going to double click on here. All right, and you see it generates that. If I want to go to the code, you simply have to right click and go to definition, and there's the shortcut for F12. And bang, we're in the code. So let's do a quick message box. Okay, so hopefully this is not too bad so far. All right, XAML is really, really handy in my opinion. It's just such a good thing to program in. All right, so let's space this out a little bit. It's already starting to look a little bit ugly. Okay, that's not too bad. The last thing I'll introduce before we do a quick little example using the grid, okay, is this idea of comments in your XAML. Unfortunately, you don't use forward slashes in XAML. You use a HTML comment, and that is you open a tag, exclamation point, and they're already telling me what I'm going to do is a double hyphen. Okay, a single line comment looks like this, and you just put your comment here. Comments go in here. Multi-line comments, let's say I want to get rid of my text block and my text box. Open up a comment like you just did, and then close it with a double hyphen and the closing of the tag, just like that. All right, and that's a multi-line comment for you there. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. You've got a single line and a multi-line, all good to go. So on that note, I'm going to delete all of these tags. So if you want to copy any of this, just pause the video and have a go. But we're going to use a grid, and we're going to organize our controls into a nice, well, nice-ish looking form. It's not going to look very pretty, but it'll look better than a stack panel. So the first step here now is I'm going to change stack panel back to a grid, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up our grid to accept a number of columns and a number of rows. So the way we start setting that up is you open up a tag, you type grid, and you put a dot after it, and you put column definitions. Okay, and I like to press enter here, so I've got multiple lines to write my column definitions. So this is just a subsection of grid, or a sub-tag, I should say, of grid, where we can specify how many columns we're going to have on our form. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep it really simple. We're going to have some text boxes where you can enter your first name, your last name. Let's say, what else can we put there? I don't know, gender. We'll put some radio buttons in there to make things a little bit more complicated. And then we'll have a big button at the bottom that's just okay. So what I need at least 2 columns for that. One on the side for the labels that say first name, last name, and all that. And then the text boxes on the right. So let's put in 2 columns. And the way you do that is open a bracket, type column definition for your tag. And then what I'm going to do is show you a new way of closing your tags. Rather than having a separate closing tag, you can actually end it in a single line. And the way you do that is put the forward slash at the end. Okay, what this is a single line tag, or a single tag that opens and closes itself all in one. Okay, the reason I do that is because there's nothing that goes inside a column definition. There's no content to it. So I can open and close it straight away. Now, I want 2 columns, so I'm going to put 2 of them in. Notice here that it's already split my form into half. All right. So now what we need to do, come underneath the column definitions subtag, and let's do the subtag for row definitions. Okay. So let's see if I can remember. I said first name, last name, gender, and then a button. So I need at least 4 rows. So same thing as before, but just change the name, row definition, and then do a quick close. And I want 4 of them. And here we go. Let's just have a quick look at the designer, and I'll flick back in a sec. There's my form. All right, it's not 100% perfect. I am going to change a few things about this, but I want to start inserting my text blocks and my text boxes and my button in there first before we do anything. So let's swap back. If you need to copy that down, pause and let's do so, but let's start inserting our text blocks to start with. So come underneath the row definitions, make sure you're separating those. I prefer to put in comments at this point. Okay, like so, and you can just put start of text blocks. All right, and I'm going to do all the text blocks first in that first column. So let's open a tag, type text block. Okay, I don't need to give it a name, thankfully. And let's start with just first name, like so. And you'll see it appears over here, well, over there. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, let's put in another text block for last name. Okay, if you can see down the bottom, it's already causing a problem. They've both appeared in the same spot in my grid. They haven't appeared in the next row down. They're in the right column, but not the correct row. So what I've got to do now is set some properties to these text blocks. Technically, I don't have to in this one, but I will. All right, to specify what row and what column that they should appear in. So the way you do that, put a space just before you close the tag and put grid.row, put an equals, and the first row, this one here, is number 0. And then we do column, grid.column equals 0. All right, that did bugger all because he already was in that spot. But I don't know, I like to be a bit more thorough. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for the second one. Grid.row, now he's in the second row. So that means he gets a 1. And then the first column, like so. So now he's in the correct spot. So let's do another text block for the gender. So grid.row equals 2, grid.column equals 0, and then we go gender. I'll put a colon just for good measure. And already you can see our text blocks set up, they're in the right spot. And the great thing about using a grid is when I resize my grid, go back, the actual controls resize as well. And this is awesome for keeping your program looking nice when people are fiddling around with the size of it, okay, or maximizing it, or whatever like that. Notice the words don't get any bigger as the form gets bigger. That's something you would have to take care of. But it's at least a little bit nicer allowing you to drag your form around. If I wasn't using a grid and all I did was drag my controls on like I did in the first 2 videos, this wouldn't occur. All right, you wouldn't get your objects moving around and scaling with your whole window. Anyway, so that's the text blocks. Let's get the text boxes in there. We only have 2 of them. So comments, start of text boxes. Now the reason I put comments at the top is just it separates your XAML a little bit and it's just easier to read. So our first text box is going to go in the first row, so 0, but the second column 1. All right. Close the box. You can see there it's highlighted that entire section. It won't look like it's got much in there, but there is actually a text box there. Now I'm going to cheat and I'm going to copy and paste this once. Bang. Put a text box in the next, not column, next row. All right, now I should have a text box next to first name and last name. There they are. Okay, as I said, it wasn't going to look pretty, but it's functional and it actually is a lot better than the stack panel. The last thing I have to do, I have to get my radio buttons for the gender. So start of radio buttons. So let's just open up a tag, radio button, okay, grid.row equals, and let's put him in row 3, so that's number 2, grid.column equals 1, and the first one we'll just put female, there he is. I'm going to copy and paste this and put this one as male. Now there's a bit of a problem. How the heck can we put both these radio buttons in the same box without them stuffing up like that? Okay. The easiest way for us to, we've already used it, is a stack panel. So you can actually put a stack panel within a grid. Okay, because I'm going to get the male and female to sit on top of each other. Okay, that sounded really bad. Don't care. Got to move along. So I'm going to start a stack panel here. Okay, close it off straight away. And I'm going to move these radio buttons to the content of the stack panel. Like so. The biggest problem you got now is that we can't specify the grid and the column of the radio buttons. We're going to specify the grid and the row, the row and the column of the stack panel instead. So I'm going to cut this, get rid of this one, paste it in there, and there we go. We've got a male and female sitting together nicely in that little section there. Pressing play, and you can see it behaving. Okay, again, resizing actually works pretty well with this kind of stuff. All right, one last thing to go, and then we're actually going to play around with the formatting a little bit before I finish up the video. Okay, I've gone way over my 10 minutes, I can tell. All right, we need a big button. So one last comment, I don't really need it, but start of the big ass button. Why not? So button, let's do the grid row equals, what's he? He's 0, 1, 2, 3. Grid.column. We're going to start him in the 0. Now that might be a bit confusing because I'm just going to put OK. Really, we don't want the button just sitting here. I wanted it across the entire bottom of the form. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to use a column span. So another property up here, grid.column span equals 2. So I'm indicating I want to go across 2 columns. And you can do the same thing for rows as well if you ever want to. So start her up, and I've got my little form going on here. Now, let's clean this up a little bit. So the only things I really want to change about this, first of all, I want to get these text blocks over here. They shouldn't be taking up such a large column. That's way too much space for those text blocks. Okay. I still want these guys to take up the rest of the space though. Okay. And that's going to be pretty easy to do. Okay. And the last thing is we might make the button take up a bit more height. All right. And we'll leave it at that. So let's have a quick look up at the top. We're going to go back up to our column definitions to start with. So over here, this is actually what's controlling the width of the column. Okay. So right now you can see there's a little 1 asterisk, and you call that a 1 star, and you can see 1 star over here. The way star system works, it's quite interesting, I think. Basically, Microsoft counts up all your stars. Okay, so there are 2 stars in there, and then it looks at how many stars that you have for each column. So for example, this has got 1 star, 1 out of 2. So 1 over 2 is a half. So it gives you half the form. Okay, and then this one over here, 1 over 2 is a half. So they both get half the form. To show you how that actually works, if I go width equals 2 star, you see I now get 2/3 of the form because we add these up. So 2 plus 1 is 3. And then this gets 2/3 and this gets 1/3. Okay. And then I can do the same thing. I can go right up there to 8 star, and you can see it's getting 8/9 of the form, and that's getting 1/9 of the form. And that's how the stars work. It's a pretty decent system. Stars are really great too when you want flexible forms because everything shuffles around as a percentage, okay? Because it only gives you 1/9 of that section. This looks really bad. So let's give it a set value because these text blocks here aren't really going anywhere. They're not moving. So I'm going to get rid of the 8 star and let's try 100. That's pretty bang on actually. Yeah, I might leave that. So if I press play, you can see that this guy, now we've got a nice short column. I keep saying short, skinny. All right, and when I resize though, because it's a set value, text blocks don't move, but this one, because it's using a star, is going to take up the rest of the room for me. Okay, so that's very handy. But if I shrink the form too much, okay, well, I can't. But if you shrink the form too much, you will lose that column because I've got to set one next to it. So that's pretty good. The columns are really good, I think, at that point. Now, let's use the star system a little bit to our advantage for this OK button down here. So the OK button's living in this current row down the bottom. So we're going to change its height. All right, let's just give it 2 star and have a look at that. Is it any good? Probably a little bit too big. Okay, don't know how I can say that when the rest of the form looks so butt ugly, but it's probably a bit too big. So let's go 1.5, and this is where things get a little bit weird because you can use fractions in the star system, and that looks a little bit better than 2. All right. So on that note, that's actually exactly what I want to leave this video. And in the next video, we're going to have a look at XAMLing styles. So if you want to start styling up all your buttons and your text boxes to look the same, that's what you're going to use as XAML styles. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, everybody. You know how to like, subscribe, and comment. I'm sure you've done it plenty of times before. Do it for me as well. But I'm going to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.